Did you know that in the lands between, the map where Elden Ring takes place in is 19.78% livable? Now this number alone does not really consider how hard it will be to live there, just that it's livable at all. And this number already assumes that we have some available resources like tools and a sleeping bag, you get the idea. I was playing with my friends in the Seamless Co-op mod, sorry console gamers. Unfortunately I didn't record those sessions, but we did take some photos after we completed the game. Bam, look at that. That is me. Yeah, I know. I like to play body type B. And throughout the journey, I thought to myself, wow, I really want to live here. Yeah, I know. I want to live in a world where these things exist. So this got me thinking, how livable is Elden Ring? And here I am. I'm not going to cover what the world was like before the Elden Ring game starts, or all of the shattering and all of the lore stuff. That's gonna take too long. I'm just gonna analyze the way the world presents us in the actual game. We're going to be looking at the main regions of the lands between, which is Limgrave, Siofra Lake, Liurnia of the Lakes, Caelid, Atlus Plateau, Mountaintops of the Giants. Now there are obvious spots that is completely inhabitable because, you know, you might die. But if we just take a deeper dive and explore all of the supposedly dangerous areas, you might be pretty surprised. Also, yes, I'm gonna do the DLC in the future, so if you just subscribe to me, you know, you'll get the notification when it comes out. At the end of each region, I'll do a comparison of how livable the area is compared to the rest of that region. Also, I'm going to be cheating, so call me a fake gamer. We are going to ignore boss arenas because those areas were intended to be fought on. We're not going to include the round table because the round table is exclusively an invitation only, so we're just going to assume that we're not inside this at all. And all caves because all of the caves in Elden Ring is just too darn dangerous, and we are going to assume that all mini bosses and invaders are still alive. So that automatically means that most of the minor Erdtrees is unlivable. First, we need to cover what makes an area livable. This is not exactly how we'd measure it in real life as well. For the context of Elden Ring, we're just gonna go through the basic survival needs. Food, water, clothes, shelter. To make things simple, we're just gonna assume that we already have tools, clothes, and shelter already readied out for us. Meaning, the main things we're gonna be looking at is solely food and water. And with the prerequisites out, we can finally begin our study. So first up on the list is what is there to say about Limgrave? When you open those gates for the first time, you're greeted by this beautiful sight. I mean, I see blue, but behind me is probably something really pretty. The question is this pretty sight also livable? It's the area that everyone sees. It's the area that teaches you that it's okay to run away from battles. It is the area that inhabits one of the most intimidating looking wildlife that I've personally ever seen. I wasn't really sure how I was gonna do this, so this is what I came up with. The way this will work is first we get the map of each region, and then we'll fill in all of the dangerous spots which will be highlighted as red. We cannot live in these spots whatsoever because it's simply too dangerous. Followed by the areas with the most optimal living conditions, which is basically food, water, no enemies, highlighted as green. And other areas that can be lived in under certain conditions will be highlighted as blue. For example, a lot of food but no water. Food, water, but a bit of enemies. This will be highlighted as blue and we could count it as livable. And everything else will be highlighted as orange as unlivable, either being surrounded by too many enemies, not enough resources, or whatever the reason is. I've spent quite a few time just following and learning all of the enemy placements in the whole map. And here are all of the dangerous spots in Limgrave. Bam! Isn't that really cool? Most of the highlights are mainly due to Godric soldiers, which as we know, will harm us. And also there are some very dangerous species, for example the Mistfoot Forest. I would never want to live there. I mean look at that thing. Do you want to live here? I don't want to live here. Now what you'll notice in every region of the lands between, the main road is always going to be dangerous. Now that doesn't mean that it's constantly filled with enemies, but what this means is that the enemies will at some point patrol around each of the area. The only exception being the start of the raid from Church of Ella. Now speaking of Church of Ella, this leads us to go through all of the safe areas in Limgrave, which is the Church of Ella. You got a chill merchant, you got water, you got food, and if you get caught by the guy on the horse, just go to the Church of Ella and you're completely safe. If you want food, just go down to the south and you'll find some sheep and goats and all that, which is nice. If you want water, just go up to the north and you'll find a pond. Now obviously you can't really travel too far before encountering dangerous foes, but if you just want to live, the Church of Ella is not a bad option. Another area that is pretty safe is the Dragon of Commute. Now it's pretty explanatory why this area is pretty good. First of all, we have water, check. Second of all, we have food, check. Third and most importantly, there is no enemies at all, which is very beneficial for our case. Now the journey towards the dragon commune is going to be a challenging one because you have to fight these douchebags, these demi-human douchebags. However, if you do manage to get through them, then you get all of this area to yourself, which is very nice. It's kind of like a test when you really think about it. Now unfortunately, there isn't a lot of areas that are like this. Most of the areas have certain conditions that we do have to be aware of. Let's start with the Fallen Hound Evergoal. Now everyone knows that this is the area where you get the best weapon in the game. But did you also know that this area can also be a pretty suitable living area? It is a bit dangerous because not too far there is a bit of a fight going on here. You see that? I wonder who will win. And these rock caterpillar things will attack you if you do an oopsie on them. As long as we don't bother them, they won't bother us. If you want any food, just go down to the south of the Evergoal where you'll find sheep and birds and all that. And for any water, just keep going down the path and at some point you'll reach the lake. Don't go too far though because of that dragon and there's a lot of dangers in that lake. But if you just dash and go, not bad. Now I did forget to mention some parts of the lake has a big crab that spawns in. Do not be afraid of the crab. If you run far enough, it won't be able to see you, but you can see it. So use that opportunity to grab everything you need. Although not the most optimal space to live in, it isn't the worst at all. So I'm just gonna put this Evergoal as livable. The other Evergoal to Stormvale is also not too bad. What you'll notice is that most of the Evergoals are pretty chill. There's not much enemies nearby and you got most of the time food and water. Now in this case we have a lot of food, which is pretty good. Only issue is no water. But yeah, well, I mean, we can figure something out. We're humans, we live in harsh conditions, we're humans. So I'm just gonna put this Evergoal as livable. Lots of food, not much enemies around. Just the issue is water, which we can overcome by building like a rain catcher or something like that. Next up is a very specific spot on the lake, which is this spot. It's very tiny. Now I will admit, this is one of the more dangerous areas because you are surrounded by a lot of enemies. However, you got the essentials, food and water. And also you got a turtle chilling here. Who doesn't like that? Alright, I'm going to be honest, I only included this area because of the turtle. Otherwise this area will be unlivable, but since we have a turtle, this area is livable. Who doesn't like turtles? So the road to Mistwood Forest all the way to Fort Height, not too far from the Grace, is this little area. This area is not too bad. Now do keep in mind there are natural predators like wolves and land octopuses. However, you're human, you can adapt it. And also there's birds, and birds are food, and there's some other creatures that I forgot, but I considered this as livable when I did the study, so I'm gonna say this is livable. Is it fun to live? Probably not. Is it pretty to look at? I don't know, you play this game, you tell me. And we're like halfway through Limgrave now. Isn't this so much fun? The Third Church of Marikar, a very solid spot to live in. Not only do you have the foundations of a church, which could become a very nice home, but you also have two sources of water and food. Now keep in mind there is a bear not too far from here, but if you're Russian, I'm pretty sure this place will be pretty fun to live in. And if you go to the water source that resides in the little beach over here, there's a big crab that will jump scare you. Or land octopus, I don't remember, but it's something big there that will kill you. So what you can do is just hug the wall and then you get free water. And then for the last potential living area is the Outer Shack. What can I say about the Outer Shack? It is pretty cozy. It is pretty nice. You get a nice view of the Great Tree. Look at that, that's really pretty. And there are sheep pretty close to the Outer Shack, which is pretty nice. We got food sources now. So why is this not highlighted green? Because no water. The water is all the way down here, and that is not very good because if we go down the hill, we're going to encounter the danger zone, which is where all of the patrol is, and we just don't want to do that. So what we can do instead is similar to the Evergoal, where we're just making like a little rain catcher or a little contraption that like goes down and scoops the water up. And yeah, this Outer Shack is now livable. The area between the Summer Water Village and the little bridge over there is pretty livable. To get water, just get close to the little lake. Most of the time, the little spooky boys don't really care much about you unless you engage with them. So as long as you keep your distance, you should be fine. And there's some food like this little like chipmunk looking thing. I don't know what it's called. It's like, I'm just calling it chipmunk. And most importantly, there is another turtle chilling here. So this makes the spot pretty livable. Just for my mentality's sake, I spent a lot of time in this video, so please appreciate my hard work. Now that we got all of the livable spots figured out, let's go through all of the unlivable spots, which I call the no-no zone. Now most of these areas are unsuitable because either it has too many enemies surrounding the area or not enough resources, which in this case is going to be food. The Colosseum arguably can make a pretty nice home. However, this home is filled with assassin wolves that jump out of freaking nowhere, so that is very surprising and also very dangerous. In case you haven't realized, you and me and you, we aren't exactly the best matchup against these creatures. I think the matchup here is going to be a bit challenging. I mean, I'm just barely 5'11" and I have to fight these 6-foot giants. So the Colosseum, because of the assassin wolves, is unlivable. The one massive shack that resides in the little forest area here, same for the Colosseum, is filled with freaking assassin wolves. Dude, where are these wolves coming from? They just kind of appear out of nowhere and they're very dangerous and surprising, but most importantly, they are dangerous. So, unlivable. Stormvale Castle. Not much to be said about this castle. Everyone there wants to kill you. It is too dangerous and risky. So in this case, let's put a what if scenario. So what if you apply to become a Godric soldier? In this case, all of this would suddenly, BAM! Livable, which is pretty good in our case. Now we are going to assume that all of the soldiers are given enough resources to keep on working, which in our case is the most ideal. Not a bad option if you consider living in Limgrave. Just apply to become a Godric soldier. Alright, I think that is everything, and now let's go and start comparing how livable it is compared to the rest of Limgrave. So I've scooped around in the internet and managed to find how big Elden Ring is as a whole, which for the record is 79 square kilometers thanks to this guy. Thank you so much, Adipalooza, you just saved me a whole lot of time. Ignoring the ocean, the total land surface of the lands between is 28.5 square kilometers. Not a bad piece of land. But instead, if we strictly look at all of the land that we can walk in, again, look at this video, he did a great job and we saved a lot of time. For the case of our studies, we will have a total land surface of 13.13 square kilometers. Because I kind of forgot about these two locations and I'm too lazy to go through it, so let's just stick with this number. I'm not going to go too far into it, but I basically measured all of the livable spots and compared them to the whole of that region. Limgrave is roughly 1.71 square kilometers. Not bad. Analyzing all of the livable spots gives us a total of 0.39 square kilometers of livability. Now here's a quick formula on calculating the percentage of the livability of Limgrave. Using the total of the livable spots, 0.39 square kilometers, divided by the whole of Limgrave, which is 1.71 square kilometers times 100, gives us a whopping 22.81% livability. Not very good if you want people to come and live here. However, not the worst as we proceed on the video. Up next is Weeping Peninsula. Humanoid rat things, monkeys, the big walking castle thing. This is, it's a bit dangerous here. Now I have found some potential living spots that you could live in. Located at the merchant shack at the west, you have a pretty sizable area to work with. Although it is a bit challenging because not too far is a moving rock thing, and not too far from the beach is these lads just like, you know, just walking. And a nice bonus, this merchant shack spot connects all the way to the Church of Pilgrimage, which is pretty nice. The Church of Pilgrimage is also another suitable spot that you can live in. Now keep in mind, the graveyard is filled with these sword-wielding skeletons, so don't go there. And not too far are these like skinny patrol guys, but I'm pretty sure you can handle them. But you got the main thing, food and water. And all of the dangers here are pretty avoidable, so this area is not too bad. And the last few habitable spots in Weeping Peninsula, just around the merchant we see before we move past the broken castle walls to Castle Morn. Merchants, food, and conveniently a nice little tower right there. Now the path to Odyssey's Rise is pretty unsafe, so to fix that we could just build like a little elevator there. And boom, we got all of this area to work with, which is very nice. And if we move past the castle walls and instead stick to the side, if we keep going, we'll end up at a nice reliable water source, which is what we want because ideally we will not want to be sniped by the golem guarding Castle Morn. As long as you know what you're doing, living here shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now unfortunately the Evergoal is pretty safe, but surrounding the Evergoal is just too many enemies, so we're just gonna count that as unlivable. From the 4th Church of Morocco all the way to the Tombs World ruins, it is pretty unsafe. It's filled with like all these bullies and you don't want to deal with them. So Weeping Peninsula has a surface area of 0.7 square kilometers with a total livable area of 0.22 square kilometers. Calculating that and we get a nice 31.43% livability. Also not very impressive, but it is better than Limgrave. Combining Limgrave and Weeping Peninsula as a whole gives us a total land surface of 2.41 square kilometers with a total area of livability being 0.61 square kilometers, making Limgrave 25.31% livable. That is 1/4 of Limgrave that is livable, which is actually pretty high. Anyways, we are done here, so let's move on to Siofra Lake. And also, if you're wondering why I look different, at some point the recording got a bit messed up. I'll put it in the background, like the video got really blurry for some reason, and the audio got messed up as well. I don't know what happened. I could complain how this was annoying, but we got livable spaces to explore, so let's continue. Siofra Lake is a smaller part of the game, but I also think it is pretty good to mention because it does fit our criteria of livability. Once we reach to the main area of Siofra Lake, there are quite a few spaces that we could live in. It is not a lot, but it is pretty safe. Look at that BBC, big black crab, and all of these electric thingies. I don't know what they're called, but they're pretty dangerous and they do a lot of damage. And also look at these guys. I don't know why they do this stompy thingy, but you know, they're cute. Now I'm just gonna highlight all of the dangerous areas. Bam, there it is. But for the safe areas, from the Grace all the way to the Hollow Horn grounds, you have food, water, and a good foundation for a potential home. And a nice bonus, you get a very pretty and beautiful scenery. I mean, I just see blue, but you know, for you, you might see something very, very pretty. There is also another area that is pretty good. If you find this portal, which good luck, it is pretty dangerous to get to this specific portal. If you manage to get here, you could be teleported to one of the cliffs just around here. And this single cliff has everything you need. You got food, you got water, and you got a nice view, which is I like nice views. However, keep in mind not too far from here is a boss. You see this guy, he is gonna attack you if you get too close to him. I did that and I learned my mistake. And also watch out for these guys, which I don't know, they kind of hang around. Just don't approach these guys or the boss over there and you should be good. Now, unfortunately, you don't really have any way to go down without using a gray, so I don't know, you can make like another contraption, like elevator thing, like we said from Weeping Peninsula, just get down. I don't know, I'm just rambling. Let's move on. I kind of rush a few things, but you know, that's what makes us human. I make mistakes sometimes, so that's where you come in and fix my mistakes, and you know, we can have an open discussion. And not too surprising, Siofra Lake is pretty small. Siofra Lake in total is only 0.16 square kilometers, which is very, very tiny. And the amount of wiggle room that we can live in is also very, very small. And that is, brace yourself, 0.04 square kilometers. Damn. That is almost as big as this thing that I'll put in the background as a reference. I couldn't really think of one right now, but you know, in the background, it'll give you a big idea just how small 0.4 square kilometers is. So if we put our numbers in our little calculations, this makes Siofra Lake 25% livable. Exactly 1/4 of Siofra Lake is livable, which is pretty nice actually. Unfortunately, all of the other underground areas are pretty unsafe because there's just too many enemies or lack of resources. So just for argument's sake, let's assume that all of the underground is completely unlivable. So with a total of 0.95 square kilometers, including Siofra Lake, this makes the entire underground only 4.21% livable, which is pretty low. But if you know the game, there is one location that I will mention that is even lower, and you won't be surprised which one it is. And now let's move on to Liurnia is the area in the lands between that I believe has the biggest and largest potential living spots in the whole game. Mainly because it's the largest region in the game, so it would make sense that there should be quite a lot more livable spots that we can find here. The lifts to reach the Atlus Plateau is pretty dangerous, mainly because, you know, it's a bit of a war zone there. I mean, Atlus Plateau is pretty much a war zone, but you know, my point is, all of this is pretty dangerous. And also around the highway lookout tower, it's just a full out war, so we will not be going anywhere near here. And also the way to the castle that reaches to Rani's Rise is pretty dangerous because, you know, there's a lot of artillery archers. Like we don't want to live here. We don't want to experience that. Now the lake itself is pretty interesting. You could say that it is pretty dangerous, but I think it's pretty situational. And here's what I've noticed about the lake. Any of the areas that is obstructed with vision, like trees or like broken buildings, is often pretty dangerous because you got these guys just like roaming around. However, on the contrary, all of the areas that are open and doesn't have much going on is actually pretty chill. Now, all of it is not pretty chill because, you know, you gotta get this big lobster to come out now and then. However, in general, all of the open spaces are actually pretty quiet, which is ideal for us. The benefit is you get a lot of resources and land to work with. So just for the sake of argument, I'm gonna highlight most of this as potential living. And also, in case you haven't noticed, since we are in a lake, we have an abundant amount of water. So the issue now is food. But I do believe we have a pretty reliable food source because of this guy right here. Now tell me, where does he get those prawns from? Because throughout the whole game, we don't see any of this item anywhere else. I believe it's in the Lake of Liurnia. Why do I believe that? Because of the lobsters that you see roaming around here and there. And what are lobsters? They're water creatures. And what are prawns? They are water creatures. Coincidence? I don't think so. And since this guy is selling prawns out in the open around this little house, it is safe to say that this area is safe. Now do keep in mind there is a lot of water, so make sure to dry your feet. Otherwise you'll get some nasty diseases and like trench foot or something, I don't know. Even the area with that magic dragon just chilling there is actually pretty safe. As long as you don't go too close to the dragon, it's actually not too bad. So in summary, if lake open, good. If lake closed, bad. Now everywhere else that's not part of the lake, the choices are going to be a bit limited. Because like I said before, there is a lot of fights and wars going on, which is not good for us because we want to live in a land with no war and no enemies. So that completely sucks. Now there is a pretty good spot that you can live at the southwest of the lake, which is basically at the Evergold, because all of the Evergolds are pretty chill. So from the Evergold all the way to the enemy camp here, granted you have to be aware of the enemies here and there, you got a pretty nice piece of land to work with. Just make sure you watch out for the creepy crawlers and you'll be fine. And conveniently, this little area also connects to the lake, so you got an even bigger land to work with. There's food and water, what else do we need? And if you manage to convince the enemies here that you're just a chill guy or a chill girl, I'm sure you can make friends with them, you know, maybe you can give them some prawns. Now some of you may be wondering why the Church of Vows is not highlighted green, and unfortunately it's because of one thing, and that is water. Now we do have a little fountain here, but I am to believe that this fountain here is not going to be very sustainable for too long. Now I think the best part of the Church of Vows is probably this guy here, the Turtle Pope. Everyone loves the Turtle Pope. If you kill the Turtle Pope, please delete the game. I hate you. Anyways, back on track. This little fountain, not it. I don't think it's enough. So I have a solution. If we just walk at the north of the Church of Vows, there is a little pond right there which will grant us all of that water sources. Now it is going to be dangerous, so what I would suggest you to do is to make a little rain catcher here and then just like put a tank container here, and then boom, you got a nice spot to live in. The Artist Shack in Liurnia also suffers the same issue. You got plenty of food, but you got no water. You can take a stroll down, make sure you pass this guy, and then you got a pretty reliable source of water. And that is it for all of the livable spots. Now let's take a look at all of the unlivable spots. You know the drill, just a whole lot of enemies. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, if you go past the castle with all of the magic arrows and stuff and you manage to reach Rani's place, I think it's not a bad place to live in, because we have to assume that all of the people living here have to get water and food somehow. So I don't know, if you like volunteer work or something, you should be fine. Now I'll quickly go over the academy because it is, you know, it's pretty fun. Everyone in the academy wants to kill us, which is not good, so we're going to do things a bit differently. Now we are going to assume that we can apply to study at the Academy of Liurnia, where you will be promptly dropped off like this guy over here, which I do feel sorry for because he got bullied pretty badly there, and so are we. However, studying at the academy will give us education, and you know what education gives us? Knowledge. And knowledge will get us to do things like this, which is really, really cool, and I would like to do that as well. But however, since this is a school environment, please prepare that your mental health will start declining pretty rapidly. So be prepared to also be bullied by everyone else there, and be prepared to be expelled because of your failing grade. So what have you learned? If you want to live at the academy, just apply a form to study there. And I'm gonna assume there's gonna be food and water and like a little dorm area you can live in, so that is all planned out. Checking all of the surface area and all of the measurements, Liurnia, no surprise, is the biggest piece of region in the lands between. We have, get ready, 3.84 square kilometers worth of land, a lot more bigger than Limgrave. And calculating all of the surface area of the livable spots is around 1.38 square kilometers, which makes Liurnia 35.84% livable. Still not the ideal number that we would want, however Liurnia does offer us a large area to work with, and it's also the most safest area that we have discovered so far. Alright, that's Liurnia done, and let's move on to the next one, which I'm pretty sure some of you are pretty curious. Caelid. If you thought that this was unlivable, you are right, it is. There's not a lot of choices here. Yeah, I did a whole scan. Caelid in general is just simply too dangerous to live in. Now I would say the festival is a bit more calm, but the journey to the festival is not going to be a fun one. But you know what they say, it's about the journey, not the destination. So if you do manage to reach to the festival, at least you got a pretty cool story to share to everyone. Now the times where the festival is not, a festival, it's just don't bother coming there. So I did think what I would make the festival be, and at the end I chose Unlivable simply because once the festival is over and everyone is working back on their regular shifts and hours, it's not going to be a fun journey to that castle. Now the areas that aren't just filled with creatures straight out of Berserk, well, the issue is, where's water? Now unless you are immune to Scarlet Rot, I don't think you have much choice. So if you want water, I don't know, you can just take the Scarlet Rot and then use one of those little water filter things that kind of make the water cleaner and then just boil it. I don't know, I've seen it in my YouTube shorts and reels, like I'll just put it in the back. And maybe if you kill the crows and the dogs, you get a pretty good source of food. Is it safe food? I don't think so, but is it food regardless? Yeah, it is still technically food. Just a suggestion though. Also another thing I should mention, if you're living in Caelid, it probably smells pretty bad here. Limgrave smells like the Greens, a bit of that farmy and foresty smell, both of which aren't real words. Liurnia is probably a very seafoody smell because of all of the lobsters and the prawns. But Caelid is just like rot growing everywhere. It smells. I've smelled my fair share of rot and it is disgusting. So if you do live in Caelid, I would also suggest to make a little gas mask or something so you don't breathe in too much of whatever this is, whatever comes out of that thing. I don't know what kind of diseases and Scarlet Rot does to the human body, but based off the gameplay, I'm assuming it's not really good. Just this big chunk of unlivable land. That's it. Actually, that is not everything because there is one spot that you can technically live in. The isolated merchant shack that resides just around here is not too bad. Now, unfortunately, you cannot live too far without encountering all of the dogs and crows. However, if you just want to live in Caelid for some reason, this spot is actually not too bad. You got a chill merchant, which by the way, dude, why are you even here? Do you not see where you are at right now? You got food, which I don't know why there's so many sheep here. I guess it's not as bad as I thought it was. Now the only issue is water, but I don't remember clearly, but I'm pretty sure there's like a little lake or like water thing nearby, so I'm just gonna put it in the background. Just take a look, you'll see it. So with enough adaptation and learning, we can live in the isolated merchant shack just fine. Everything else doesn't have a safe source of food. So that's it for Caelid. Unless you are in a desperate situation, ideally you would not want to live anywhere in Caelid. Now Caelid is actually pretty decently sized land with an area total of 1.83 square kilometers. Unfortunately, with a livability area of, now get ready, 0.03 square kilometers, lower than Siofra Lake. Now if we put this in our calculations, Caelid is less than 2% livable with a percentage of 1.59%. Jesus Christ, that is a very, very low number, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you wouldn't be surprised that Caelid got the lowest number. It's going to be pretty challenging to live here, but it is not impossible. And that is it for Caelid. Not much to say. It's pretty dangerous. It's not fun. It probably smells bad. I got nothing else to say. It's pretty dangerous to live here. So ideally, don't live here. Simple as that. I mean, unless you want to, which go ahead. I'm not judging you. Anyways, let's move to Atlus Plateau, a very nice and pretty area. I mean, look at that tree. I can see why this guy is always staring at it. Now, this may be a very pretty sight, but is it a livable sight? Now, this may surprise you, but Atlus Plateau is actually pretty dangerous. Not as dangerous as Caelid, of course, but there aren't a lot of options here. Now, there are 3 different sub-regions here, so right now we're just going to be focusing on the middle one. Now, this area has a lot of patrol and a lot of guards and a lot of enemies just roaming around, which is unfortunate because there are a lot of space that we could use to live in, but it's just a lot of enemies and patrol camps, so what can you do? And not too surprising, all of the main roads, too dangerous, don't bother. And the unfortunate thing is there isn't really a spot in Atlus Plateau that is safe to live in, except for one location, which is in Mount Glemner, which I will talk about very soon. The Golden Lineage Evergoal. Not a bad spot, it's pretty calm, there's food not too far, the only issue is water, but like I said multiple times, I'm not going to say it again, so just add things and you'll be fine living here. Now on the main road on the left side, you got just a tiny twinkle of land to work with. It doesn't have too many enemies patrolling that area and it has food and water. Now the area between the Hero's Grave and the Stormcaller's Church, from here all the way to here, not a bad spot to live in. Unfortunately, the 2 areas that I just mentioned do have some guards and a boss just chilling there, so just don't go anywhere near them and you should be fine because there is food and water pretty close to the area. Between the windmills all the way at the north, not a lot of land to work with, but it is enough land to live in. It is pretty dangerous because you are kind of cornered, but I did my study and none of the enemies in the windmill ever come here. Now there are going to be these old wrinkly guys, they're pretty slow, so I'm pretty sure we can just grab our water and just go back to where we're camping, so that's all good. Now the last spot that I discovered that could be a decent spot to live in is all the way at the unsightly catacombs. From here all the way to here is the land that you can work with. You got water at the little lake here and you got some food in form of sheep and there's probably birds or something nearby. Now keep in mind there are some perfume equipped hooligans surrounding the area, so please be careful. So maybe in theory if you dress yourself up as a perfume hooligan, you should be fine living here. You can make a friend or 2. That's all of the livable spots that I've been able to find. Unfortunately, everything else is not very fun. The forest in the middle of Atlus is riddled with these creatures. They're very tall and I don't want to deal with them because they give you death blight. And the animation for that death is not, that I don't want to experience that. So don't live here. And I was hoping one of the windmills would have been a nice spot to live in, but you know, there's rats and these creepy ladies, they're just dancing. But then if you go up a bit, some of them are not dancing and they're pretty scary, so I would not want to live anywhere near them. And the road to the capital doors is also pretty unsafe because, as I said before, there's just too many enemies. So measuring all of the surface land, we get a total of 1.24 square kilometers, which is not too bad, with a 0.11 square kilometers of livable space, which makes Atlus an impressive 8.87% livable. Not too promising for an area that's supposed to be a capital. Now on the west of Atlus Plateau we got Mount Glemner. Not much to say, it is a complete war zone. I would even argue to say that this section is equally as dangerous, if not more dangerous than Caelid itself. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but you know what I mean. It's a war zone, you don't want to live there. All of this is not livable except for 2 spots that I've managed to find. The Volcano Manor, which we can assume is pretty safe because there are other people living in that manor and we are going to assume that they have the resources available to live in that manor. So the Volcano Manor we're just going to put as green. And just at the bottom of Mount Glemner we have the Craftsman's Shack. Now what you'll notice is there's a lot of food. There's a lot of sheep around here for some reason. Way more than we need, which is perfect. Now we are kind of trapped here because if we move up, there's got to be something up there. And if we move down, there's got to be more things down there. And also no water. So you know what that means. That is right. Raincatcher And water tank. Mount Glemner, 0.55 square kilometers with a livable area of 0.02 square kilometers, making this mountain a low 3.64% livable, which is pretty surprising considering all of the circumstances here. And lastly, for Atlus Plateau, we got Linda Royal Capital. It's quite a big city, but unfortunately this very big city is also going to kill us, so it's not very livable. Not much to say about it. The first issue is the front is just a big old battlefield, and if we get inside the actual capital, it is simply too dangerous. There's simply too many people there that want us dead. Now, since there are some guards here and there, it is safe to assume that there are some resources available like water and food. And since there is a functional prison, it is safe to assume that we can also apply ourselves a position to work in the royal capital, which if we get accepted in any position in the royal capital, like, I don't know, like a prison guard or something, it's not going to be too bad to live here. Actually, I'm not sure about the prison guard. The dung eater kind of scares me. So Lindale has a total of roughly 0.6 square kilometer. That's a pretty sizable city. Combining all of these three regions, we get a total of 2.39 square kilometers with a total livable area of 0.13 square kilometers, making Atlus Plateau as a whole a total of 5.45% livable, which is still pretty surprising because look at it, it is just so pretty. Why is this area so damn dangerous? And now we are up to our last region, so let's get to it. Mountaintops of the Giants. I mean, it's a mountain and there are giants. Now, like I said before, humans can adapt to a lot of things, so I'm pretty sure a pretty good portion of us can live in these mountains just fine. Now, the best thing about the mountains is there is snow, and you know how snow is formed, it's through water, and you know what is water for? For our survival. So all of this, water is okay. Now the next question is, how about food? This is unfortunately the bad news. The animals here are like these spirit things. I actually don't know what they're called, but you can't attack them, so that kind of sucks. But that doesn't mean there aren't any food sources at all. Just at the frozen lake from here down to Dragon with the Sword is chilling is not a bad spot. You have some snow crabs just chilling here and there, so that's food ticked off, making this place livable. And also these wolves are like chasing that little beetle thing. So I just find it cute. Look at them. They're just chasing. They're just chilling. You can just chill with them. Fortunately, you have a pretty sizable land to work with. From the lake all the way to this part of the mountain, you're good. Now keep in mind that this part of the mountain is also pretty foggy, so if you do go there, just keep in mind you might encounter something that you definitely didn't want to. Now everything else at the left here is just like too dangerous. You got archers. That rock mountain castle thing is like shooting artillery everywhere, so don't go near that. And the other area that is also not bad to live in is the big frozen lake just outside of the First Church of Marika. Keep in mind that it is pretty dangerous because of the fog and that big dragon, and also from the Church of Marika there are a couple of dogs just eating. And this is just, I'm not trying to say you should, but you can kill the dogs and eat them. I'm not saying you should eat dogs, but it is something to keep in mind because, you know, sometimes we gotta do things that we aren't comfortable with. Everything else is too dangerous, including the Evergol, which unfortunately, despite being chill, there's just a lot of dangerous spurs just roaming around not too far from the Evergol, so that's unlucky. The Shack of Lofty is not too bad, but unfortunately, there's no food, and also not too far, there's a bit of a fight going on. So, unfortunately, not this one. This one was pretty short because there really wasn't much to discover, so I'm gonna make this one quick. Total area, 1.66 square kilometers. This is only the land that is walkable. Total livable area, 0.40 square kilometers. This makes Mountains of the Giants 24.10% livable, which is pretty consistent from all of our calculations. And that is all the lands between, from Limgrave all the way to the Mountaintops of the Giants, including all of the underground areas. And I think to wrap things up, I'm going to present you a bit of a seminar. So just give me one moment. Where is it? Okay. Hello, testing. Hello, Tarnish and everyone here today. I thank you for attending this seminar, and now to begin, the discussion today is about the livability of the lands between. If the lands between is seen in a general overall view, many would presume due to the conditions and situations of the area that the lands between is unlivable. However, after a study that will be shared today, it is plausible to maintain and sustain a comfortable living lifestyle despite the dangers that inhabit the area. Any what-if scenarios will not be included for the seminar, examples being joining Godric's army or studying at the academy. This discussion will purely focus on the livability as it is without setting up any scenarios. Starting with Limgrave, despite the large amount of Godric patrol, there are small pockets of livable spaces that can be utilized as living headquarters. With a total surface area of roughly 1.71 square kilometers, only roughly 22.81% serves as a livable space. That is roughly around 0.39 square kilometers of land that is suitable to live in. Keep in mind, certain areas will require additional knowledge as some areas will bring its challenges compared to others. However, it is not uncommon for humans to adapt in these conditions when compared to real-world data. Moving on to Weeping Peninsula, initial inspection believed that this section of the lands between will provide more appropriate and more optional living headquarters. However, the results returned only 2 plausible spots to live in. Keep in mind these 2 spots are fairly dangerous as both have either a powerful force or several dangerous persons patrolling around the facility that should be noticed. Combining Weeping Peninsula and Limgrave gives us a total of 25.31% livability. Moving on to the underground section, we have Siofra Lake, which serves as the only potential spot that we could live in due to its large and open resources. Now the livability of Siofra Lake alone is 25%. However, if we compare this to the rest of the underground with a total of 0.95 square kilometers, we get a total of 4.21% livability in the underground sections. Liurnia contains the largest potential living spots in the whole lands between. On the lake, it was discovered that any clear and open areas proved to be significantly safer than the areas that had forests and large obstructions of view. Calculations led this area to be 34.67% livable. Moving on to Caelid, being the most dangerous and unlivable spot to live in due to the potential diseases and the threatening wildlife that inhabits the area. Despite these conditions, only one spot has been noted to be an optional spot to live in, which is the isolated merchant shack that resides on the cliff. With the lowest livable region in the lands between, Caelid, with a total surface area of 1.83 square kilometers, with a tiny 0.03 square kilometers of livability, is less than 2% livable space, specifically 1.59% livable. Atlus Plateau is a large area in the lands between with higher than usual amount of enemy patrol. Despite that, there are a few solid options that could be lived in. Calculating all of these options gives Atlus Plateau a livability of 5.43%. And lastly, Mountains of the Giants. Despite the amount of water sources, the food sources are extremely limited in these regions. Despite the challenges, it is discovered that there is a 24.10% livability. Now keep in mind that this does not include how hard it would be to live in the region, only that it is livable. And that is all of the livability of each region and sub-region. Please pause and use these calculations for your desire. And calculating only the surface area of the lands between, the study has shown that the lands between has a total surface area of 12.18 square kilometers, a very reasonable and large amount of land. This makes the land in the lands between a low percentage of 20.94% livable. Now combining this with the total amount of underground regions, and this number becomes significantly lower, totaling with a surface area of 13.13 square kilometers with a livable total area of 2.59 square kilometers. The lands between, with both land and underground combined, gives the Elden Ring a livability of 19.73% livability. Now keep in mind that this study has only been performed once and is not 100% accurate, so if there are any suggestions or improvements, please write a comment down below for any mistakes that are noticed for this study. And that is it for the video. If you like this, please subscribe, like, bell icon, everything, all of the YouTube stuff. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time when I upload in 3 months.